He had charm money couldn't buy, and a secret not even wealth could bury. At Hawthorne Manor, the linens were pressed, the silver polished, and the rules never broken. Until one night, love crossed a line it wasn't meant to. This isn't just about infidelity. It's about choices, about what we protect and what we let go. If stories of secret love and haunting truths speak to your soul, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the Mr. Ross Story Trail. May today's story remind us, may we love boldly, protect wisely, and forgive when it brings peace. Esme Rosario stood at the iron gates of Hawthorne Manor with a duffel, bag on her shoulder, and $28 in her checking account. Her heart thudded with every step up the long stone driveway, past hedges trimmed, like royalty in fountains that whispered of lives she'd never imagined living in. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in places like this. Not after dropping out of college. Not after sleeping in her car 3 nights in a row to make sure her younger brother had his asthma medication. But fate doesn't knock gently, it pushes. The job listing had been simple live-in domestic help. Must be discreet. Must be dependable. Immediate start. She applied in a panic, interviewed in a blur, and now, here she was, facing a home that looked like it had rules carved into its bricks. The door opened before she knocked. A woman in her 60s, thin and firm-faced, greeted her. "You're early." Esme nodded, adjusting her grip on her bag. "Yes, ma'am. I didn't want to be late. Follow me. You'll be cleaning the West Wing. Meals are at 6. Staff quarters are at the back. Don't wander." It was less of a welcome and more of a warning. But Esme didn't mind. She hadn't come for comfort. She came to survive. Her room was small, but clean. The sheets smelled of lavender. She stared at the ceiling that night and prayed softly. "Lord, I don't need luxury. I just need a chance, a place to earn, to rest, to keep my head down. Protect my heart from foolishness and guide my steps with sense." But sense is slippery when hearts are involved, and hers didn't stand a chance. Esme first saw Alaric Duval on a Tuesday afternoon. She had been dusting the antique mirrors in the formal dining room, careful not to breathe too loudly, when a voice from behind startled her. "I don't believe in mirrors. They only show you what you expect to see." Startled, Esme turned too fast. The feather dusters struck the vase near the edge of the table. A delicate crash followed, porcelain scattering across the floor like spilled pearls. Her heart stopped. I'm so sorry," she stammered, bending to gather the pieces with shaking hands. But instead of anger, the man knelt beside her, picking up shards calmly. "You don't have to bleed to prove you're sorry, Miss Rosario," she whispered. "Esme Rosario." He smiled. Not a smile made for photographs, but the kind meant to set people at ease. "Well, Miss Rosario, I happen to believe some things break just to remind us what's truly worth holding on to." She wasn't sure what stunned her more, the kindness or the man himself. Alaric Duval, Southern magnate, wealthy recluse, the man whose name she'd only heard whispered by staff with careful voices. And now he was crouched beside her, sleeves rolled, no trace of ego. She couldn't speak, so she smiled. A small one. He didn't stay long, just enough to finish helping her clean the mess and say, "Welcome to Hawthorne Manor." The house had rules, but no one told Esme the heart had its own. She saw him again, and again, always by accident, passing through the garden, carrying books down the hall. Once she caught him feeding the koi fish at dusk, tie loosened, hair wind-tousled like he'd walked out of another life. She tried not to watch, tried not to notice the way he looked at the sky like he was searching for something lost. But the heart notices even when the mind resists. And hers had begun to wander. When the head housekeeper fell ill one weekend, Esme was asked to take over the main floor cleaning schedule. It meant working in Alaric's study. She hesitated, not because she feared him, but because she feared herself. That's when it happened again. A glass of water, a tray, her nerves. One wrong turn near the bookshelf and everything went crashing to the rug. Alaric looked up from his leather chair, startled. Esme froze. Her hands trembled. I can fix it." He set down the pen. "You don't have to fix everything, Esme." She blinked. He had never called her by her first name before. He rose slowly, walked over, and handed her a cloth. "You don't owe anyone perfection, least of all me." She nodded, but her breath caught. She was close enough to smell the cedar in his cologne, to see the faint scar on his jaw. to feel the pull. That's when the danger began, not in grand declarations, but in quiet moments like this, moments that felt like falling. Esme told herself it was nothing. A look, a pause, a kindness offered too freely. She repeated that lie each morning as she tied her apron strings and stepped back into a world that glittered with things she couldn't afford to want. But wanting has a way of growing quietly. After that afternoon in the study, Alaric seemed to appear more often. Not suddenly, not forcefully, but with a consistency that felt intentional. He would ask how her day was going, if she'd eaten, if the work was too heavy. No one had ever asked her those things before. Not her professors when she struggled to keep up after hospital visits. Not the part-time managers who scheduled her back-to-back shifts knowing she needed the hours. Not even her relatives who loved her, but expected her to figure it out. Yet here was a man who owned half the land surrounding her childhood neighborhood, asking if her hands were sore. She tried to keep her responses polite. Short, professional, but professionalism becomes fragile when someone listens. One evening she found him in the kitchen long after dinner had ended, sleeves rolled, hands dusted with flour. "You bake?" she asked before she could stop herself. He looked up, surprised, then smiled. "Badly," she laughed. A real laugh. It slipped out before she remembered herself. That sound lingered between them. "Would you like some?" he asked. She hesitated. Staff weren't meant to sit with the owner, but her stomach growled in betrayal. He noticed. "That's a yes." They sat at opposite ends of the table, sharing bread that tasted better than anything she'd had in weeks, not because of the recipe, but because of the quiet. No pretenses, no hierarchy, just two people existing. He asked about her life. She gave him fragments, enough to satisfy curiosity, not enough to expose pain. But pain leaks anyway. "My father was injured at work," she said eventually, eyes fixed on the plate. After that, everything changed. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush her. He just listened. "That must have been hard," he said softly. It was the gentlest sentence she'd heard in years. From then on, their conversations became routine. 5 minutes by the stairwell, 10 in the garden while she trimmed hedges, a shared smile in the hallway that lingered too long. Esme began to notice things she shouldn't. How Alaric avoided the front rooms during social calls, how his laughter faded quickly when alone, how his eyes carried weight that wealth never lightens. He noticed things too. The way she worked through exhaustion without complaint, the way she flinched when reminded of bills, the way she read borrowed novels at night like they were lifelines. They were different worlds, yes, but loneliness sounds the same everywhere. The day she cut her finger, it changed. It was minor, a nick from a kitchen knife while preparing fruit trays. She wrapped it quickly, embarrassed. Alaric saw the blood. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," she said too quickly. He stepped closer. "Let me see." She shook her head. "It's nothing," but he took her wrist gently, not forceful, just firm enough to stop the shaking. His touch was warm. The room felt smaller. He cleaned the cut carefully, his brow furrowed with concentration. She watched his hands, steady and deliberate, and something inside her shifted. This was dangerous. She knew it. "You don't have to take care of me," she whispered. "I want to," he replied, without thinking. The words settled heavily between them. He released her hand as if burned. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "That wasn't appropriate." She nodded, heart racing. "I should get back to work." But neither of them moved right away. The truth hovered unspoken. Something had crossed a line neither had planned to step over. That night, Esme couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling again, heart loud in her chest. "This can't happen," she told herself. "Not here. Not with him." She was staff. He was promised. To something else, someone else, even if no one said it aloud. And yet, her heart had already begun answering questions she hadn't asked. The next morning, Alaric avoided her. No greeting, no shared glance. It hurt more than she expected. She told herself it was relief, proof that he understood the danger too. But relief shouldn't ache like this. By afternoon, she found a folded note tucked beneath her cleaning cart. Just 4 words. "Garden. If you're free." Her breath caught. She folded the paper carefully, as if it were something fragile, and followed. Esme walked toward the garden with careful steps. It was late. The sun had dipped low, casting the grounds in amber light. The air smelled of roses and wet stone. She passed the trimmed hedges, the marble bench, the white trellis she once cleaned in silence. Now it felt like she was walking into something she couldn't name. She found Alaric near the roses, hands in his pockets, back turned. When he heard her steps, he didn't speak at first. Neither did she. Silence filled the space where reason should have lived. "I shouldn't have touched you," he said finally, "even for something as simple as a cut. I know that." She looked down, voice soft. It didn't feel wrong. He turned to her. "That's the part that scares me." She met his eyes, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. The garden had always been beautiful, but now it felt like confession. "I keep thinking," he said, "about how you walk like you're apologizing for your own presence. How careful you are, how quiet, like you've learned to survive by shrinking." She held her breath. "You don't have to do that here," he said gently. "I don't know how else to be," she replied. He took a step closer. "You deserve a world where you're not afraid to take up space." Her chest tightened. "You make it hard to keep things simple. Maybe simple isn't what we need." She should have walked away, said goodnight, let the moment pass. But her feet didn't move, and neither did his. It wasn't a kiss, not yet. Just the moment before one, the moment where the world holds its breath. But the sound broke it. Footsteps, heels on stone. They snapped apart instantly, both turning toward the archway. Serafina Beaumont, elegant, composed, watchful. Her eyes flicked from Alaric to Esme, and back again. She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Interrupting something? Esme felt the blood drain from her face. Alaric stepped forward. "Serafina, I wasn't aware the help was invited to the gardens," she said coolly. Esme's throat closed. She lowered her eyes, nodded quickly, and walked away before the shame could spill from her chest. She didn't look back. That night, she packed in silence. She left her badge, her apron, and a note that said only, "Thank you for everything." Esme. She didn't say goodbye. Some stories don't get to end with clarity. Some hearts break without noise. Back at the manor, Alaric searched every corner, every room, every path. She was gone, vanished before he could ask her to stay. He confronted Serafina, but she denied everything. Claimed she'd barely spoken to her. Claimed Esme had probably found another job. But his instincts screamed otherwise. He ended the engagement within the week. No dramatic fights, no apologies. Just a clean public announcement and a silent retreat from the world. People whispered, as they always do. But Alaric didn't care. The house felt colder, the garden silent, and the woman with the hazel eyes, a memory he couldn't stop seeing. He returned to the rose garden each evening, alone, not to look for her, but to remember. Have you ever fallen for someone you knew you shouldn't? Tell us in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else. Serafina Beaumont arrived at Hawthorne Manor the same way she did everything in life, like it was already hers. The staff knew to prepare extra place settings, to press the linens, twice, and to replace the flowers with her preferred white orchids. It was always that way when Serafina visited, not because she asked, but because people assumed. She didn't need to remind the world of her status. Her presence did the work. Heiress to a legacy wine empire, graduate of private academies with names embroidered on her resume, daughter of families who signed business deals over legacy dinners. She was polished, powerful, and unbothered, and she was engaged to Alaric Duval. At least, that's what the newspapers said. When she stepped out of the car that day, her heels touched gravel with precision. Her hair was pinned with deliberate ease, her eyes shielded by designer sunglasses. Her diamond ring caught the afternoon light as she adjusted her coat. "Tell Mr. Duval I'm here," she said to the butler. Not coldly, not warmly, just plainly, like one might speak to a concierge. Alaric wasn't expecting her, and that was the point. Serafina had always known what kind of man Alaric was. Charming, yes. Mysterious, of course. But ultimately, safe. Their engagement wasn't built on fireworks. It was cemented in strategy. 2 family names, 2 legacies, a tidy solution for stakeholders who still believed in appearances. Love, that wasn't part of the terms. They had their own rooms, their own cities, their own silent understanding. Serafina liked it that way. Predictability was power, until it wasn't. She noticed it before she saw it. Something off. The house wasn't just quieter, it was softer. The tension in the air wasn't professional, it was personal. The kind of shift that doesn't happen from redecorating. It happens when someone new starts living in the spaces they're not meant to. She saw Esme the next morning, barely a blur down the hall, carrying fresh linens. Serafina paused. There was nothing outwardly alarming. The girl was plain, even forgettable at first glance. But instinct doesn't need evidence. She watched the girl walk away and felt something coil in her chest. Later that afternoon, she wandered into the conservatory. The door was ajar. She stepped quietly over the threshold, planning to pass through to the sunroom, until the sound of the piano stopped her. Not polished notes, just tentative chords, like someone searching for the right melody. Alaric was seated at the keys, but he wasn't alone. Esme stood beside him, frozen, their hands barely touching. Serafina stood still, hidden by the glass divider, just enough to see. Alaric reached for Esme's hand again, gently guiding her fingers to the keys. They whispered. She laughed. And then, just once, he kissed her. A moment so tender, it felt like confession. Serafina said nothing. Not then. She turned around, walked calmly down the corridor, and closed the door to her guest suite. But her silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation. Serafina always preferred quiet moves. Her mother once told her, loud women get blamed, quiet women get results. That morning, she asked the housekeeper for a list of staff assignments. Just curious who's been working where, she said with a smile that didn't invite questions. Esme's name appeared 4 times in the West Wing rotation, once listed in Alaric's study, twice noted in kitchen assistant's logs. Serafina folded the paper and slipped it into her purse. No drama, no shouting. That wasn't her style. Power didn't scream. It whispered. That afternoon, she asked Esme to bring tea to her room. The request went through a supervisor, like everything else. On paper, it seemed normal. By the time Esme knocked on her door with the tray, her palms were damp. Come in, Serafina called lightly. The room smelled of white orchid perfume and old money. Every surface was clean, cold, and intentional. Esme entered with lowered eyes. Set it down there, Serafina said, motioning to a small table by the window. Esme obeyed quietly. She turned to leave, but Serafina's voice stopped her. I didn't catch your name. Esme paused. Esme Rosario. Rosario, Serafina repeated, savoring the syllables. Pretty name. Esme nodded, unsure what to say. Serafina stood and crossed the room slowly, her diamond ring catching the afternoon sun. You've been here long? A few months. She nodded, stepping closer. You like it here? Esme hesitated. Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Duval, he's been kind to you? The air shifted. Esme's voice faltered. He treats everyone well. Serafina smiled, a calm, measured smile. He's very generous, especially to those who stay in their place. Esme's chest tightened. She wanted to leave, wanted to speak, wanted to scream, but she said nothing. Serafina stepped even closer, voice low and deliberate. You seem like a smart girl, Esme, and smart girls know when something isn't theirs to want. A long pause, because when people forget their role, things tend to fall apart for them. Quickly, Esme's throat burned, but she didn't cry, not in front of her. She nodded once, and left without another word. Alaric knocked on her door that night. She didn't answer. He waited. Esme, he said softly, talk to me. Still she stayed silent, because she knew now, this wasn't a fairy tale. This was a fight she couldn't win. Back in her room, Serafina poured herself a glass of wine and watched the fireplace flicker. She wasn't angry. She was reclaiming what was hers. Or so she told herself. Love never entered the picture. But ownership? That was another matter entirely. Esme wrote a letter before dawn. Short, quiet, final. She left it on her pillow with the necklace Alaric had once given her, a simple chain with a tiny glass pendant. Then she gathered her things and walked out the back gate before sunrise. No goodbye, no accusations, only silence. The conservatory had always been Esme's favorite room. She wasn't allowed to linger there, of course, but sometimes, when the house was quiet, she would pass through slowly, letting her fingers graze the ivory keys of the grand piano near the glass wall. She never played. She'd grown up around noise, sirens, bus brakes, shouting through thin apartment. walls, but music was something she'd only ever listened to from a distance, until Alaric had asked her to stop walking. Just once. Play something, he'd said gently. I can't, she'd whispered. Sure you can. Come here. She had hesitated, but when he took her hand, lightly, as if waiting for her to pull away, she didn't. He guided her to the bench, sat beside her, and placed her hand on the keys. Just feel it, he said. Her fingers shook. The notes were hesitant, awkward, but he didn't laugh. He hummed beside her, coached her softly, and then her fingers relaxed. He placed his hand over hers. She looked at him. The world slowed, and for a breathless second, his lips met hers. Not rushed, not rehearsed, just real. A kiss that wasn't meant for scandal or selfishness, but for truth. But now that moment was behind her, wasn't it? Esme sat alone in the bus terminal the following morning, knees drawn to her chest, the necklace still warm in her hand. She hadn't meant for any of this to happen. She didn't chase him. She didn't plan it. She didn't even believe a man like Alaric could ever truly see a woman like her. But he had, and it hurt. Because now, she had to pretend it didn't matter. Back at Hawthorne Manor, Alaric stood in the conservatory, staring at the piano bench. The memory was still fresh, the sound of her laugh, the look in her eyes, the softness of her lips. He could feel it all, and yet she was gone. Gone without a word. Gone without a goodbye. And worse, without a reason. He confronted Serafina that night. Did you say something to her? She blinked, feigning confusion. To whom? Esme. Serafina raised a brow. The maid? Don't play dumb. She smiled faintly. I didn't have to say much, Alaric. Smart girls know when to remove themselves. He stepped closer, jaw tight. You don't get to make that decision. She met his eyes coolly. You and I were an arrangement, a convenient one, but don't insult me by pretending you're in love with a girl who scrubs your floors. There was venom in her voice now, but he didn't flinch. I'm ending the engagement, he said quietly. She laughed, but it cracked at the edges. You'll ruin everything. No, he said. Everything was already ruined the moment I started caring about someone who made me feel whole. 2 days later, the press received a carefully worded statement about a mutual and respectful end to a promising union. The mansion fell quiet again. Staff didn't ask questions, but they noticed the change. The roses began to wilt. Alaric no longer played the piano. His smile faded into something distant. The man who once walked with purpose now moved like someone carrying something he couldn't put down. If you were Esme, would you stay and fight, or walk away with dignity? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk choices. The morning Esme left, nothing looked different. The sun still broke through the lace curtains. The grounds were still trimmed. Breakfast was still served. But for Alaric Duval, something essential had gone missing. He waited for her to appear at the edge of the corridor, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, with that calm, thoughtful presence he had grown to expect. She never came. By noon, he was pacing. By evening, asking questions. Has anyone seen Miss Rosario today? No, sir. She wasn't at breakfast. She didn't report to laundry either. He walked the halls she used to clean, the garden she once passed through, the study where her soft voice once filled the silence with life. She was gone. No warning, no word, just absence. He checked her room himself. The bed was made, the closet empty. A folded note sat neatly on the windowsill beside the necklace he had given her, the only thing she had ever accepted from him. The note read, I'm sorry, I had to. He read it again, and again, until the words stopped making sense. He sat on the edge of the narrow bed and stared at the walls. Her scent still lingered in the room. Lavender and lemon, familiar, clean, and vanishing. He held the note to his chest and whispered her name. Esme. In the following days, Hawthorne Manor felt like a stage with no actors. The hallway lights were left off longer than usual. The roses in the front courtyard drooped under their own weight. The piano in the conservatory gathered dust. Alaric walked past it each day. He never touched the keys. The press had already published their stories about the broken engagement. Beaumont-Duval merger called off. Private break, public shock. He ignored them all. His mother called, twice, left voicemails filled with quiet disappointment and veiled accusations. You've embarrassed our family, Alaric. His reply came 3 days later, through a signed transfer of multiple family assets to her estate. No words, just freedom. He couldn't explain it to anyone, not in terms they'd understand. Esme wasn't just a passing distraction. She had become the one safe thing in a life built on image and expectation. She hadn't just left the house. She had taken something with her, something he didn't know how to name. Some nights he poured 2 glasses of wine and left one untouched across the table. Some mornings he walked the entire estate before sunrise, hoping to feel her energy in the places they'd once met in secret. But the garden no longer smelled sweet. The hallways no longer hummed. Everything that had once whispered possibility now screamed silence. The staff noticed the change, though no one spoke of it openly. He didn't bark orders or rage. That wasn't his way. But he stopped smiling, stopped appearing at dinners, stopped speaking unless necessary. The warmth in his voice had gone flat, like a piano out of tune. One day he stood in the center of the conservatory, sunlight streaming through the glass walls, and looked at the piano again. His fingers hovered over the keys. He pressed one, just one. A single note echoed into the quiet. It hurt more than silence. He left the room without playing again. Weeks passed. Alaric's footsteps grew slower. He ate less, slept less. Even the smallest details reminded him of her. The scent of lemon in a cleaning cloth, a book spine she once dusted, the faint trace of her handwriting on a discarded notepad in the study. His world didn't collapse loudly. It emptied quietly. One afternoon he returned from a board meeting, one he barely spoke through, to find a letter waiting on his desk. It was from an old friend, someone from university, someone he hadn't seen in years. The message was kind but clipped. "You're slipping, Alaric. I don't know what you lost, but whatever it was, it mattered." He stared at the ink until the lines blurred. He began to write letters he never sent. To Esme. At first he poured his heart into them, asking why, begging for a sign. But over time the letters changed. He stopped asking. He started apologizing. The engagement ring once meant for Serafina was still in his drawer. He stared at it now and then, not because he regretted ending it, but because it reminded him how many choices he had made based on silence. He had chosen to be cautious, chosen to bury his feelings beneath tradition, chosen to let someone else control the narrative. Esme hadn't been reckless. She had been scared, and he hadn't protected her. He wandered the estate like a man searching for something he didn't deserve to find. He stopped attending social events. He declined invitations to speak at fundraisers. The staff began taking instructions from the estate manager, not because he was unavailable, but because he was unwilling. In the mirror, he no longer recognized himself. The lines on his face deepened. His smile, once warm and relaxed, had become a distant echo. The fire that had once lived behind his eyes now flickered like the last flame in a glass lantern. He still functioned. He still donated to causes, still answered emails, still kept his empire moving. But it was a man on autopilot, a man haunted not by scandal, but by the absence of someone who had once made him feel seen. He began to walk through the rose garden less frequently. The flowers there had begun to rot. No one pruned them anymore. Their once rich color had faded. He let them grow wild, out of control, as if the decay was a punishment he deserved. One night, standing beneath the trees near the courtyard, he whispered aloud, "I should have asked her to stay." No one answered, only wind. He visited her room once more. Nothing had changed. The pillow was still untouched. Her folded note still rested in the drawer. He read it again. "I'm sorry, I had to." That was the only closure she'd left behind. But the way she looked at him, that last time in the garden, spoke of a goodbye she didn't want to give. She had been protecting something, or someone. But from what? By the end of the second month, he stopped writing the letters. He kept them in a box, more apology than confession. And still, every morning, he wondered, where did she go? Did she think of him? Was she safe? But one question stayed louder than the rest. Would she ever come back? It was a quiet Thursday when the envelope arrived. No markings, no return address, just his name written in ink on the front, Alaric Duval. The handwriting was careful, elegant, unfamiliar. It arrived with the afternoon mail, wedged between a property invoice and a request for a fundraising dinner he had no plans to attend. He almost didn't open it, but something about the way his name was written gave him pause. There was care in the curve of the letters, a stillness in the slant, not formal, not cold, just personal. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single photograph, a woman holding a child. The woman was Esme, and the child, a little girl with soft brown curls, full cheeks, and hazel eyes that mirrored her mother's. Alaric's breath caught. He couldn't move. He stared at the image for a long time, as if it might rearrange itself into something less impossible. The little girl looked no older than 2. His heart slammed against his chest. He flipped the photo over. One sentence. You should know the truth before your heart turns to stone. There was a folded page beneath the photo. He opened it, hands trembling. Alaric, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if you'll care, but I've carried the truth alone for too long. And I believe, deep down, you deserve to know. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I was made to. The night Serafina saw us in the conservatory, she confronted me, not with screaming, but with silence. A different kind of threat. She asked me to leave quietly. Said she could make things very difficult for me if I didn't. I didn't believe her until she told me what she'd found out. My family's debts, the job history I tried to bury, the scholarship I lost when my father was injured, the hospital bills, the eviction notices. She offered me money, a large amount. I didn't take it, but I took her warning seriously. She said if I stayed, I'd be accused of manipulating you, that she could destroy what little I had left, that I'd ruin you. I believed her, and I couldn't bear the thought of dragging you into a scandal, especially after I found out I was pregnant. The paper shook in Alaric's hands. He dropped into the leather chair by the fireplace, breath shallow, vision swimming. Pregnant? I didn't plan to keep her a secret from you. I planned to tell you everything, but by the time I had the courage, I was too far gone and too ashamed to face you. Her name is Lucia. She's 2 now. She looks like you when she smiles. We live in a small town. I work at a bookstore cafe. We're not rich, but we're safe. She's healthy. She loves music. She claps when I hum the same notes you once played. I tell her bedtime stories about kindness, courage, and truth. But I haven't yet told her about you. I wanted to wait until I could tell her you were proud of her. I still don't know if you will be. Alaric closed his eyes. His jaw clenched. His chest ached with a weight he hadn't felt since Esme vanished. There was more. He forced himself to keep reading. I don't expect anything from you. Not now. Not money. Not explanations. Not even forgiveness. I only ask this. If you loved me at all, if any part of what we shared was real, come meet her. She deserves to know where she comes from, and you deserve to know what your heart created. If you can't, I'll understand. But if you can, we'll be waiting. Esme. He pressed the letter to his lips. Then he folded over and wept, not the tears of a man defeated, but the kind that come when something is broken and now revealed. Alaric didn't sleep that night. He sat in the conservatory, the letter beside him, the photograph pressed. Against his chest like a missing part of himself had been returned. Over and over, he saw her face. Not Esme's, though he missed her with every beat of his heart, but the child, Lucia, hazel-eyed, bright, innocent, his daughter. A child he hadn't known existed for 2 entire years. A child he didn't get to hold the day she was born. Didn't get to name. Didn't get to protect. A quiet fury rose in him, not toward Esme, but toward himself, for not fighting harder, for not seeing the pressure she must have been under, for trusting that love, once silenced, would speak up on its own. By morning he had packed a bag. He canceled all his meetings, told his estate manager he'd be unreachable, and left. No security team, no assistant, just him, the letter, and a name, Lucia Rosario. He started with the envelope. It had no sender details, but the postmark gave a clue, rural North Carolina. From there, he combed small-town directories, called 4 bookstores, tracked down every cafe in the county. 3 days passed. Then, a woman on the phone hesitated when he asked for Esme. You mean Esme Rosario? She asked. Alaric froze. Yes. She works mornings at a place called Pine and Page. It's a bookshop, little cafe attached, quiet place. Is she there now? No, she's off today, but she'll be in tomorrow. Alaric gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Thank you, he said. That night, He stayed in a roadside inn with peeling wallpaper and flickering lights. A far cry from Hawthorne Manor, but he barely noticed. He stared at the ceiling and whispered a prayer. Lord, give me the right words. Let her see that I'm not the same man who let her walk away. Let me show her what I should have fought for back then. The next morning, he stood outside the bookstore. It was modest, painted deep green, with flowering plants in wooden boxes beneath the windows. A small hand-painted sign read, Welcome to Pine and Page, coffee, stories, peace. He opened the door. A bell chimed softly overhead. The warmth of fresh paper and roasted beans met him like an embrace. And then he saw her. Esme stood behind the counter, wearing a beige apron and her hair tied back loosely. She was helping a customer, smiling politely, eyes a little tired, hands still graceful. She hadn't changed much, but something about her was steadier now, wiser, like life had shaped her edges but not her soul. He didn't speak, not yet. She turned to place a cup on the counter. Their eyes met, and time, just for a moment, forgot to move. Her lips parted slightly. Her hand dropped from the cup. Her face paled. She blinked, as if questioning her own sight. You found us, she said, barely above a whisper. His voice trembled. I never stopped looking. For a moment, the space between them was filled with everything they hadn't said. Every night she spent awake, wondering if he hated her. Every moment he replayed, wishing he had chased after her the day she left. And in the middle of that ache, the promise of something new. He took a step forward. I read your letter. She nodded once. Her throat tightened. I didn't know if you'd hate me. Hate you, he said softly. Esme, you gave me something I can never repay. You gave me a daughter. Her eyes brimmed. She lowered her gaze, afraid to fall apart. I was scared, she admitted. You had so much to lose, and I didn't have anything left. You had me, he said. A pause. And you still do. The door to the cafe's back room creaked open. Esme stepped aside, wiping her hands on her apron. Her voice was quiet, unsure. She's in the reading corner. It's her favorite spot. She thinks I don't see her sneak cookies. Alaric smiled faintly, but his hands trembled. Every step toward that little corner felt like stepping toward the part of himself he didn't know was missing until now. There she was. Lucia sat on a colorful cushion surrounded by books, a half-eaten ginger cookie in her hand. Her curls framed her face in soft, playful waves, and her eyes, those unmistakable hazel eyes, lit up when she saw her mother. But then, she saw him. She tilted her head, not afraid, just curious. Children know. They feel things adults bury. She stared at him like she knew he wasn't just another stranger. Alaric knelt down slowly, not wanting to overwhelm her. Lucia leaned closer, eyes wide. Hi, his voice cracked. Hi, sweetheart. Esme watched from a distance, hand pressed to her chest. Lucia stood and walked over, cautious but open. You look like my nose, she said suddenly, pointing to her own. Alaric laughed, a sound mixed with disbelief and wonder. Do the first? She nodded. Mommy said I have her eyes and a mystery nose. He looked up at Esme, and she gave a tearful smile. He turned back to Lucia. Well, I think we solved it. Lucia looked at him again. Are you a daddy? His throat tightened. Yes, I am. She didn't ask anything more. She just walked up and placed her small hand in his. And in that moment, without permission, without planning, he belonged to her. Fully, irrevocably. They sat on the floor for what felt like hours. She asked if he could read her a book. He said yes. His voice shook through the first few pages, but steadied with her laughter. He read, and lived, and healed, one sentence at a time. Later that day, the three of them sat in the quiet of the empty cafe. A cup of tea in front of Esme, a cup of milk in front of Lucia, a new rhythm between them, uncertain but real. I want to be part of her life, Alaric said gently. I don't know how, but I'll do whatever it takes. Esme didn't speak right away. Then she's not the only one who missed you. The tears came again, but softer now. Not out of loss, but out of return. That evening before he left, Esme walked him to his car. The sky was lavender, the air still. They stood in silence. He turned to her. Do you think there's a way back? She looked at him for a long time. I think if we're both willing to fight for it this time. Yes. He reached for her hand. She let him. And for the first time in 2 years, Alaric Duval breathed like a man with hope. Do you believe people deserve second chances after betrayal? Type redeem if yes, or never if no. Let's see what love means to you. The next morning, Alaric returned to Pine and Page before the shop opened. He sat on a bench across the street, coffee cooling in his hand, waiting, not because he expected anything, but because hope had a new name. Lucia. When Esme arrived, she paused at the entrance. She saw him. He stood quickly, brushing invisible dust from his coat. "Good morning," he said. She nodded. "You're early." "I didn't sleep much. Neither did I." A pause. Then she opened the door, just enough to let him in. The shop was quiet before the day began. Esme moved through it with ease, turning on lights, checking the register, refilling pastry trays. Alaric followed her quietly, unsure if he belonged in this new world she had built. "I like this place," he said finally. "It feels honest." She looked over her shoulder. "It saved me, in a way." "How?" "I needed something to pour myself into, something small, gentle, predictable." He nodded. "You built peace." Her eyes softened. "I tried." Lucia arrived a short while later, led in by a teenage girl who babysat during Esme's early shifts. She spotted him instantly. "Hi again." He smiled. "Hi, little one." Lucia took his hand like she had done it 1,000 times. "Can you read me the bumblebee story?" Esme raised a brow. "You told him already?" Lucia beamed. "He looks like someone who's good at stories." Alaric grinned. "I'll do my best." They sat together on the same reading rug as the day before. Esme stood behind a nearby shelf, pretending to sort books, but really, just watching. Lucia leaned on him as he read, asked questions, giggled. Alaric felt his heart expanding in ways he hadn't prepared for. This child, his child, was already unlocking parts of him that success and solitude had kept buried. Later that afternoon, they closed the shop early. Esme invited him to walk with them to the nearby park, not as a promise, but as a step. He accepted. They walked slowly, Lucia skipping ahead, holding a feather she'd found, talking to birds like they were old friends. Alaric glanced at Esme. "May I ask something?" "Depends what it is. Did you ever hate me?" She looked forward, watching Lucia dance along the path. "No. I hated the silence. I hated how quickly you let me go. But no, I never hated you." He breathed deeply. "I hated myself for not finding you sooner." "You couldn't. I made sure of it. I would have moved heaven to find you. I didn't want you to..." A pause. "I wanted you to be free of me. I thought that was the noble thing. But now, I don't know if I was brave or just broken." He stopped walking. "I'm not here to make you relive it all, Esme. I'm not here to fix it in one day." "Then why are you here?" He turned to face her. "Because I want to start again, not just for her, but for you, for us." Her eyes glistened. "But what if we break again?" "Then we rebuild, slower this time, together." The sky darkened by early evening. The town was small enough that weather always felt personal. Windows fogged, street lights blinked awake, and through the cafe windows, raindrops began tapping softly. Alaric stood by the counter, watching Lucia press her face against the glass and draw a crooked sun with her fingertip. "She's not afraid of the rain," he said. Esme dried a mug, smiling faintly. "She thinks it's music." He turned to her. "Do you?" She looked out at the slow drizzle. "Some days." They sat in the back room as the rain picked up, the scent of cinnamon rolls and paper rising between them. It was quiet, except for Lucia's humming. Alaric held his teacup in both hands, grounding himself. "I used to think love had to be perfect to be real," he said, "but I was wrong. Love's real when it survives what's imperfect." Esme looked at him, eyes full. "You said something to me once," she whispered. "In the dining hall, when I broke that vase." He remembered instantly. "Some things are meant to break, so we know what's worth putting back together." She nodded. "I never forgot that. I meant it then. I mean it more now." There was a long silence between them. Not empty, full. Then Esme broke it. "I still don't know what comes next." "We don't have to," he said gently. "We just have to know we want it to come." She looked at him for a long moment. "What if I'm still afraid?" He reached across the table, not to grab, just to offer his hand, palm open. "I'll wait right here until you're not." She blinked slowly, emotion gathering at the corners of her mouth. Then her fingers met his, and for the first time in years, she let herself breathe. Later, Lucia curled up in Esme's lap with a picture book. Alaric sat on the floor beside them, resting his head back against the sofa, his eyes drifting shut for the first time in days. Esme ran her fingers through Lucia's curls and whispered a truth she'd been carrying too long. "She's never had this before," she said. "A moment like this, a man beside her, a calm house, a reason to hope." Alaric opened his eyes. "She'll have it now." She studied him. "You're different. I had to be. Losing you changed me, but knowing I had a daughter, that redefined me." Her voice was fragile. "And if I'm still figuring out who I am, then let's find out together." Outside, the rain fell softly. Inside, the warmth returned, not just in the room, but in their hearts. The next day, the rain was gone, but the stillness it left behind lingered in the streets, like a blessing over everything it had touched. Inside the cafe, Lucia was already coloring at a small table near the window, her tiny boots lined up neatly beside her chair. Esme brewed coffee while Alaric quietly restocked a row of books she'd mentioned were always falling out of order. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Something had shifted, not loudly but with certainty. Around noon, Alaric took Lucia to the corner bakery. She held his hand as they crossed the street, chattering about bees, her favorite, socks, and how her stuffed rabbit can't read yet. But he listens very well. The shop owner gave them an extra roll on the house. "Your little girl's a charmer," she said. Alaric looked down at Lucia, beaming with flour on her nose. "My daughter," he said. The words landed heavy in his chest. Warm. Sure. True. Back at the cafe, Esme watched them return through the glass, two shadows coming home. Lucia ran in first. "We brought muffins." Alaric followed, handing Esme a coffee he'd picked up. She laughed softly. "You remembered my order. I never forgot." They ate lunch together at the counter. No big declarations, no tension. Just a man, a woman, and a child, sharing food like they'd done it 100 times, like this wasn't a reunion, but a rhythm they were always meant to return to. After closing, Esme wiped the last table while Alaric swept the front step. Lucia sat by the door, singing to herself, drawing clouds and suns in her little notebook. Esme looked over at him. "You know, you don't have to stay here forever." He straightened. "Do you want me to go?" She walked over slowly, arms crossed, voice quiet. "I want you to stay because you choose to. Not because of obligation, not because of guilt. I choose to stay," he said. No hesitation, not just for her, but for you. For the life we left waiting too long. Her eyes glistened. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move. He just stood there, letting her lean, letting the day settle around them. That night, after Lucia fell asleep with the crayon still in her hand, Alaric helped Esme fold blankets in the back room. She looked at him and said softly, "You never asked why I named her Lucia. I figured it meant something beautiful." She smiled. "It means light." He nodded, touched. "She is." Esme paused. "But it wasn't just about her. It was about what I hoped would return." "What's that?" She looked into his eyes. "You. No more pretending. No more distance. Just quiet, hard-earned grace. A new beginning. Not perfect, but possible." 3 weeks after the reunion, Alaric stood once again at the gates of Hawthorne Manor, but this time he wasn't alone. Esme sat beside him in the car, her fingers laced in her lap. In the back seat, Lucia hummed a tune she'd made up herself, swinging her feet, excited to see the castle with the roses. The estate looked different now. Not physically. The brick walls still stood, the archways still elegant. But in Alaric's eyes, it no longer represented pressure or expectation. It looked like possibility. They didn't return with an announcement. There were no staff lined up. No dinner parties. No press. Just the three of them. He'd closed the house to outsiders weeks earlier. This moment was for them. No audience. No performance. Only truth. Esme walked through the halls slowly, taking in every detail. The paintings. The curve of the staircase. The place where her old cleaning cart used to roll too loudly. But this time, she wasn't here to serve. She was here because she'd been invited back, not for what she could do, but for who she was. Lucia ran ahead, marveling at the chandelier. "Mommy, can we live in a library?" Esme laughed. "It's not a library, baby. It should be." Alaric knelt. "We can make a room just for books, just for you." Lucia gasped. "And bunnies?" "And bunnies," he promised. In the days that followed, they settled into a rhythm, not perfect, but peaceful. Esme spent mornings helping Alaric restore a forgotten corner of the manor, an old sunroom filled with dust and old records. They opened the windows, aired out the space, and placed cushions on the floor where Lucia could nap in the light. Afternoons were spent walking the grounds, sometimes in conversation, sometimes in shared silence. Evenings became sacred. They read stories. They cooked meals together. They healed, not through declarations, but through consistency. One night, Alaric stood at the window, watching the trees sway in the breeze. Esme walked in, barefoot, robe tied loosely at the waist. She leaned against the doorway. He turned, smiled softly. "Remember the first time we stood this close?" She nodded. "You smelled like cedar and stubbornness." He laughed. "And you looked terrified." "I was. I'm still learning how to be worthy of you." Esme stepped closer. "You already are," she said. Not because he was perfect, but because he'd chosen to stay. The next Sunday morning, Alaric invited Esme to sit with him in the garden, the same one where their hands once brushed by accident, where glances held meanings they couldn't voice, where Seraphina's presence had silenced what could have been. Now, the space felt different. The roses had been trimmed back, the soil refreshed, a new bench added under the oak tree where Lucia had started feeding the birds. They sat side by side, the air still, the silence gentle. "I have something for you," Alaric said, reaching into his coat. He pulled out a small, worn box. Esme blinked. "What is it?" He opened it slowly. Inside lay the necklace he'd once given her, the one she'd returned when she left. "I kept it," he said. "All this time." Her hand trembled as she reached out and touched it. "You don't have to wear it," he added quickly. I wanted you to know I never gave it to anyone else. I never even opened the box again." Esme looked at him. "You never moved on?" "I tried, but no one else knew how to see me without asking what I could give." "And I never gave you anything," she whispered. "You gave me peace," he said, "and a reason to fight for more." They sat in silence again, until Esme spoke. "I was angry for a long time," she admitted. "Not at you, but at the situation, at myself, at the unfairness of it all." "I know," he said, "and I deserved it." "No," she said, "you deserved the truth, and I should have stayed and fought." He turned to her. "You did what you thought was right. I should have made you feel safe enough to stay." Lucia ran into the garden then, carrying a small cup filled with water and daisies. "Look," she said proudly, "I made a potion." Esme laughed. "What does it do?" "It makes people happy." Alaric leaned down. "Then I think you're already magic." Lucia handed him the cup. "You keep it." He took it like it was priceless. That evening, after Lucia had gone to bed, Alaric found Esme in the sunroom. She was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, watching the last light of day stretch across the floorboards. He sat beside her. "I used to think love needed to be loud," he said. "Grand, dramatic, impossible to ignore. And now, I think the quiet kind lasts longer." She nodded. "Me too." He reached for her hand again, and this time she held it without hesitation. No fear, no shame, no more running. Esme stood before the grand mirror in what used to be one of the guest bedrooms. Now it was hers. She wasn't dressed in pearls or lace, just soft linen and a quiet smile. The room was no longer filled with silence or orders or distance. It held warmth, play, and peace. She turned slightly and saw Lucia on the bed behind her, wrapped in a knitted blanket, asleep mid-sentence with a picture book spread open on her belly. Outside the window, the trees swayed. Inside, the house breathed differently. It was no longer a place to serve. It was a place to stay. That weekend, Alaric held a small gathering, not for business or image, but to mark a new chapter. No press, no family heirs, just friends, a few neighbors, some of the staff from Pine and Page who had watched Esme struggle and grow. There was music, laughter, and at the heart of it, a woman and a man who had once let love slip away, and now chose it with open eyes. Later that night, after the last guest had gone, Esme stepped out onto the front steps. Alaric joined her, their fingers naturally interlacing. "You tired?" he asked. She smiled. "No, just full." "Of what?" "Hope." He looked at her, his voice lower now. "I never imagined we'd end up here." "I did," she whispered. "When?" "The day I left. Even then, I believed. If there was anything real between us, it would find its way home." They turned and looked into the house. Lucia had placed stickers on the kitchen cabinets. She'd painted a sun over the hallway chalkboard. She had filled every room with presents, and they wouldn't erase a thing. A few days later, Alaric made an announcement. He wasn't leaving his legacy behind, but he was redefining it. He turned one wing of the estate into a literacy center, with Esme overseeing the project. "Books," she said during the opening, "saved me more than once. Now I want them to rescue others." No one clapped louder than Alaric, except Lucia. Their love didn't return in fire and thunder. It returned like sunlight on water, gentle, patient, warm, no longer hidden, no longer forbidden, just whole. If this story moved you, click like and share it with someone who still believes in love after heartbreak. At the heart of every story is a choice: to run or to stay, to hold on or to let go, to bury truth or finally tell it. This was never just about a cheating heart. It was about three people, each broken in their own way, trying to find something solid in a world full of illusions. It was about Alaric, who once mistook control for connection, about Esme, who chose self-preservation when no one else would choose her, and even about Serafina, who, in her own way, was fighting to keep the one thing she thought she could never earn, love that couldn't be bought or brokered. But in the end, the heart has a language of its own. Let's talk about Alaric. He was born into a world where love came second to legacy, where smiles were expected and silence was rewarded, where marrying a name mattered more than marrying a soul. But when faced with real love, humble, inconvenient, undesigned, he chose to give up the comfort of expectations. He could have clung to status. He could have rewritten the story to protect his pride. Instead, he admitted what most never do. He had let go of something good, too soon. And when life handed him another chance, he didn't waste it. He fought, not with words but with presence. He didn't rescue Esme. He stood beside her and let her become who she always was meant to be. Now, Esme, a girl who once carried guilt like second skin, she gave up everything to protect what was growing inside her. She left behind comfort, companionship, and the only place that ever felt like home, because her peace was non-negotiable. She didn't ask for pity. She didn't demand apologies. She raised her child, quietly, faithfully, alone. But the real beauty of her journey, when love came back, she didn't fall into it blindly. She took her time. She asked the hard questions, and only when she saw that love had learned did she let it return. She came back to Hawthorne Manor not as a maid, not as a secret, but as an equal. And Lucia, she never knew the weight of the past. All she knew was her mother's kindness and the quiet strength of a man who read stories with his whole heart. She didn't need a perfect father. She just needed one who stayed. She got that, and more. Now let's talk about the real lessons, because this wasn't a fantasy. This was a story about timings that weren't right, until they were. Truth that hurt, but healed. Love that refused to be traded, silenced, or hidden. It reminded us that, 1. The right love doesn't always come at the right time, but it will return when hearts are ready. 2. No amount of status can substitute for connection grounded in truth. 3. Love isn't loyalty without dignity. It's choosing each other, again and again, without losing yourself. 4. And forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't forgetting. It's freedom. For both of you. In the conservatory, the piano was dusted, retuned, reclaimed, and one afternoon, Lucia sat down on the bench where her parents once sat. She couldn't play, not yet, but her fingers touched the keys gently, like she'd always known them. Esme stood in the doorway, smiling. Alaric knelt nearby, just listening, and in that quiet room the story came full circle, because what had once been broken was now playing again. This was the story of his cheating heart, but maybe, just maybe, it was also about finding the pieces worth putting back together.